Have you ever met someone who taught you the biggest lesson in life, without ever raising their voice? If not, then listen closely, because this is the story of an old cowboy, and the last ride he ever took. A ride that taught his grandson what real courage truly is. In the wide, red-dusted plains of Texas, where the horizon melts into the burning sky, lived an old cowboy named Tom. Tom wasn't just any cowboy. He was once the kind of man people whispered about the best rider in the county, the storm chaser, the man who never backed down from a wild horse. But years passed, bones stiffened. Old injuries reminded him he was no longer 20. Now Tom spent his days quietly on a small ranch with his grandson, Luke. A gentle boy, bridled but frightened of almost everything. Luke would often sit on the porch steps, watching his grandfather mend a fence with steady, weathered hands. He'd ask, "Grandpa, were you ever scared back then, when you rode into storms?" Tom would stop his work, look out at the vast, empty land, and then turn to his grandson with a gentle smile. "Son," he'd say, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves, "everybody's scared. Bravery isn't about not feeling fear, it's about moving anyway." One dry afternoon, after a rough dust storm had swept through, news reached Tom. A neighbor reining in his horse at their gate delivered the message with a heavy heart. His old horse, Rusty, the faithful partner who had carried him through decades of sun and thunder, had wandered off into the rocky canyons to the west. The neighbor shook his head, his face etched with concern. "Tom, you're too old to go out there. The canyons are treacherous. Let it be." But the old cowboy's jaw tightened. He looked towards the west, where the rocks cut into the sky like jagged teeth. Some things you just don't leave behind. Luke, overhearing the conversation, tugged at his grandfather's sleeve, his eyes wide with worry. "Grandpa, please, don't go. It's too dangerous out there." Tom placed a large weathered hand on the boy's small shoulder, his touch firm but reassuring. "Luke," he said, his gaze unwavering, "some things you don't do because they're easy, you do them because they're right." And so, with a quiet resolve that needed no words, he saddled up one last time. As he prepared his horse, Luke, with a newfound determination in his eyes, refused to stay behind. He insisted on coming along, to help, to be there. The old man looked at his grandson, saw a flicker of his own stubborn spirit, and simply nodded. The two set out into the open land. The sun blazed overhead, a relentless eye in a cloudless sky. Dust swirled around their boots with every step, and the silence of the plains was broken only by the crunch of gravel and the sigh of the wind. Every step seemed to echo with memories of the cowboy Tom once was, a younger man who could ride for days without tiring. On the trail, to pass the time and perhaps to pass on his wisdom, Tom told Luke stories. He spoke of the wild colts that bucked him off, of the sudden, violent storms he outran, and of the long, lonely days when he wanted to quit but never did. Luke listened, captivated. He finally found the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind for so long. "So, you weren't born brave?" Tom chuckled softly, a dry, rumbling sound. "No, son, no cowboy was ever born brave. We become brave by standing back up. Every single time fear knocks us down." Hours passed, the landscape grew harsher. They reached the mouth of a narrow, winding canyon. Tom's old leg, the one he'd injured years ago, ached badly with every step, but he hid the pain, his face a mask of stoicism. Yet, Luke noticed. He saw the slight limp, the way his grandfather would pause to shift his weight. "Grandpa," the boy said, his voice soft with concern, "we can turn back. It's too much for you." Tom stopped, leaning against a rock and breathing hard. He looked at his grandson, then deep into the canyon ahead. "No, son," he said quietly, but with an iron will. "When something depends on you, you finish what you started." As the sun dipped low, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and purple, a faint, broken whinny echoed through the rocks. It was a sound of exhaustion and pain. Rusty they found him a little further in, tired, hurt, and stuck between two large, unforgiving rocks. Tom knelt beside his old friend, his hands, though trembling slightly with age and effort, moving with a determined purpose. He looked at his grandson. "Take the rope. Easy now. Slow." Luke's hand shook with fear as he took the coarse rope. The weight of the moment felt immense. "Grandpa, what if I mess this up?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Tom looked him straight in the eye, his gaze steady and profound. "That shaking you feel," he sighed softly. "That's what being alive feels like. now do it anyway. Together, with sweat on their brows, fear in their hearts, and an unshakable bond between them, they worked. They pulled, they pushed, they coaxed, and finally, they freed Rusty from the trap. In that moment, as the old horse stood shaky but free, Luke felt something new bloomed quietly inside him, a feeling warm and strong. It was courage. On the long journey back, as twilight settled over the plains, Tom stopped. He lifted Luke, who was small for his age, onto Rusty's broad back. The boy looked down, confused and surprised. "Aren't you riding home, Grandpa?" he asked. Tom looked up at him, a soft, tired smile gracing his lips. The smile of a man who has given all he had left to give. "No, son," he said, his voice gentler. "Today wasn't about me. This was my last ride, and your first real one." The canyon wind blew gently, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. The sky burned a final, brilliant gold before fading to indigo. And for the first time in his young life, sitting tall on the back of the old horse, Luke didn't feel like a scared little boy anymore. He felt like a cowboy. So remember this, my friend. Bravery doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It isn't fearless. True bravery is simple. It's doing the right thing, especially when it's hard, especially when you're scared, and especially when no one's watching. If this story touched your heart, follow for more Talis, where every story teaches you a little English and a little life.